Hey everyone, who wants to talk a little bit about the ALM survey on mental health in the legal profession that came out just last week? And I have been working my way through it and have so many things I want to respond to, and I will be responding to and having conversations about this in the coming days and weeks. But were a few things that stood out to me that I really could not wait to bring to conversation with you all, and I'm looking forward to doing that right now, just sharing a few of those thoughts and hearing what you all have to say. So I read through the results. I looked at the fantastic interactive, the infographic information, and I got to be honest, you might not be surprised, but the results were disheartening. And I kind of knew that because this is the work that we're in and it's the work that we do, but it's disheartening to see that despite raised awareness and efforts by so many firms and people in this space, we have seen some increase in awareness, but we have yet to see some really significant positive change in the overall mental well-being of those in the legal profession, both attorneys and the business professionals within firms who support their work. And one aspect that caught my attention was the strong opposition that was captured to the movement for better mental well-being within our profession. And if you've read the article that went along with the survey results, you know some of these same things might have jumped out to you. But some of the comments from the survey were things such as, associates and staff are coddled nowadays. Give me a break. We need to stop victimization training, that people need to have a stronger work ethic, or to have more mental toughness. They talked about the terrible associates who emphasize their own needs over everyone else's. There were several senior partners blamed young lawyers' parents for their children's lack of resilience. So as you might have guessed, many of these opinions came from senior equity partners and a generation of lawyers who really feel that because they made it through without anyone paying any mind to or paying any concern to their mental well-being, that so should everyone else. I made it, I'm fine, so you should be fine too. And it brought to mind a conversation, or maybe it's better to be described as an interaction that I had with someone about 5 years ago. And this particular person, attorney in a social networking situation, asked what I did, and I said that I worked on lawyer mental well-being and the well-being of those in the legal profession. And he said, yes, that trend. We didn't need that back in my day. We just toughed it out. I was fine. Yes, people were shitty to me, and I worked awful hours, and people yelled at me and threw things at me and told me I was an idiot. But look at me, I'm fine. And I said, wow, that sounds really, really hard. That sounds like it would have been a very unpleasant many years long trial to go through. How did you cope? And he kind of looked taken aback, and he said, like we did in the old days, I went home and I kicked my dog and I yelled at my wife. So, were people really getting through it? Were their families getting through it? Now, that's a really extreme example, but I don't know actually. Maybe it's not as extreme as it feels to us right now, right? That we had fewer or accepted fewer other coping mechanisms other than chandeliering the stress and strain that we had, that was and even abuse, right, that we faced in the workplace. So because I'm human, my mind immediately kind of jumps to all of these several assumptions about people who make offhanded comments like this. And I have various salty and spicy retorts and hot takes that I could make because, again, I'm human. But I decided instead, after reading these responses, and I'm sure there were many more that weren't reported on, I decided to ask myself, what is the most generous assumption I can make in this moment about those who made comments such as that? Because often I would certainly hope in moments where I've said things that people could judge me on, I would want someone to try to at least make the most generous assumption of where I was coming from. So what is the most generous assumption I can make in this moment? What is the most generous assumption that you might be able to make of these statements and of these people who made these statements? And I thought about the fact that we know, generally speaking, that lawyers of all generations, not just older generations, but lawyers of all generations, generally speaking, tend to score low on emotional vulnerability, tend to be natural skeptics. One of the things actually that makes lawyers great at their job, right, is their natural skepticism. And also they experience high levels of isolation. So low emotional vulnerability, high skepticism, natural skepticism, and high levels of isolation. And what we know about all of those things, that kind of is a trifecta of indicators of low empathy, right? Being isolated, being afraid or uncomfortable with vulnerability, being skeptical of others' experience. So all of those things can lead towards low empathy for someone else's well-being. But I believe that there's also something else underneath all of that bluster and frustration and even anger at the need for increased attention to well-being. And I thought a lot about that today. And I think what is underlying that is grief. Or more specifically, an attempt to stave off grief. Imagine, if you will, that you are perhaps in the autumn of your life. I'm maybe in the early autumn of my life. I'm over 50. So imagine being kind of in the later years, especially of your professional career, right? Your professional life. And you've reached the pinnacle of your career. You've achieved all that you have set out to achieve. Maybe you've made equity partner, maybe you're a practice group leader. You're whatever it is that you have, you've grabbed that golden ring. And the sacrifices to do that have been enormous, have been great. Perhaps it has taken a toll on your life outside of your profession. Perhaps it took a toll on not only but specifically relationships with spouses and children. Maybe there's been a breakdown in family. Or your interpersonal relationship. Maybe you can recount arguments, maybe many, many arguments about missed milestones or lack of intimacy and connection. There might have even been full estrangement in some of those relationships that were heartbreaking. Or maybe just even if it wasn't about other relationships and your life outside in terms of relationships, but just other things that you had to set aside, you weren't able to do. You weren't able to foster other things that you wanted for your life because the focus was only on, or felt like it had to be, serving this one goal. And while it was never how you wanted it to be, you felt you had no choice. Your career is vitally important to you, and it should be. That career provided financial stability. It created social reward. And the sacrifice did have its rewards. So it helps to make you feel better that, yes, I might have lost out on a lot. I sacrificed a lot, but the reward was great. You're comforted by that reality. Until, imagine then, someone says to you, it didn't have to be that way. You didn't have to sacrifice all of that to achieve that pinnacle. It didn't have to be that way for you, and I'm not going to let it be that way for me. So, presented with that, you're kind of left with one of two options. You push back against it with all of your might. No, that's not true. It has to be the way that I did it. You're just not trying hard enough. You don't have enough work ethic. You're lazy. You're not resilient. You're not all of these things. I'm going to push back against that. Or I have to grieve it. I have to grieve that actually was true. And I just didn't know it. I didn't know it in time. And now the sacrifices have been made. And now I have to grieve that the sacrifices and battle scars did not have to be requirements of a successful career. So first you have to grieve the loss. And then, like Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. When we know better, we do better. So then we can allow for other possibilities. We can allow for the possibility that the resilience that we talk about when we say people aren't as resilient as they used to be, we can allow for the possibility that resilience actually isn't what we originally thought it was, right? We used to think that resilience was just grinning and bearing it, or more like gritting and bearing it. That we just have to push through no matter the slings and arrows, and we come out battle wounded and scarred. But that's not actually resilience. That's survival for sure. But it's not resilience. We learn that resilience is being adaptable and growth-oriented, learning to do things better, more efficiently, and with less suffering. Allow for the possibility that younger lawyers aren't coddled or spoiled or lazy. Younger lawyers understand the math. They understand the basic business premise that simply working more hours is actually the worst way to be profitable. They understand that their value is in their expertise and skills, not merely in their willingness to pretend to be indefatigable. Allow for the possibility that altruism aside, we can put away altruism if we want, but putting altruism aside, allow for the possibility that investing in well-being has proven economic benefits that when embraced will benefit your clients and make your law firms more profitable. So there's this saying, and when I first was studying to be a therapist, when I got my master's degree in counseling psychology, my first focus was on marriage and family therapy, couples and family therapy. And there's this old saying that you probably have heard of before, and that is, you can be right or you can be happy. Now, that's a simplistic kind of thing, but there are so many of us, myself included, right? I am counting myself in on this, that I am so set sometimes on being right about something that I lose the bigger picture of what is going to make us happy. So you can be right or you can be happy. And I'm going to extend this and say you can be right and spend energy pushing against changing tides, or you can be happy and actually more profitable. So those are some of my thoughts about just off the cuff, maybe my hot take on some of the results for the survey. And we're going to continue to have this conversation over the coming days and weeks. And on June 7th, we are really going to dive into the data and the nitty-gritty and about the economics of well-being, allowing for the possibility that focusing on and making well-being a strategic priority isn't just a nice to have, isn't just coddling, but is actually the more profitable way to run a law firm. So if you're interested in that, I'd love for you to join me on June 7th. I'll drop a link below showing you how to get registered. And I even have some discount codes for that. I would love for you to drop your thoughts also in the comments below this. Let's get a conversation started. How do we move the needle? How can we begin to move the needle? The needle's not it. I mean, it's wiggling, right? We're really pushing against it, and we're trying to impact change, but change is hard, as evidenced by some of the reactions and responses from some folks. Change is hard and it takes time. What do you think helps move the needle? What do you think still needs to happen in law firms to make it a not just a nice to have, but a strategic priority? What have been your experiences, good, bad, and ugly, in your space? I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to have a conversation and try to find a way to push that needle ever more forward. So thanks for joining me today.